English class used to mean one thing when I was a child, and since then has evolved into a completely different meaning. In elementary or middle school, I did not even know what analytical writing meant because creative writing was emphasized during that time of my life. Of course, these creative lessons were probably put in place to keep the average mind of a fourth grader interested, but at the same time were used to work on our grammar skills for our future writing. However, the shift into analytical writing around 7th grade seemed abrupt and proved difficult for me. Not only did this new form of writing appear dull to me, but it also challenged me in ways I'd never been challenged before. Nevertheless, my writing has improved with every year, and I now often find myself enjoying the task of analyzing literary works. Even after acquiring these new writing skills, however, I still enjoyed and still do enjoy creative writing, especially novels. One particular flaw in my writing today is audience awareness, and this flaw reflects the fact that I enjoy reading novels in the ways in which many authors seem to make their novels flow. Audience awareness is one of my most stubborn writing flaws, which has been hard to break throughout all my years of writing papers. This showed in my first paper, Getting the Point Across, where I struggled mainly because of lack of audience awareness, which to me has always seemed to get in the way of writing a paper that flows well. So in response to this, I often forget about audience awareness in order to keep the rhythm. What I've realized in this class is that what may seem repetitive to me is in fact what makes my paper flow well to a reader who has never read the literary work I am analyzing. Throughout English 1102, I have worked to maintain my strengths of introductions, good transitions, and good analysis while trying to improve the lack of audience awareness in my papers. In my second paper, The Subjectivity of Suffering, I found it much easier to find that balance between rhythm and audience awareness. In my first paper, Getting the Point Across, I was very passionate about what I was writing about because the poem I was analyzing, The Exaggeration of Despair, gave a lot of room for interpretation. This allowed me to show creatively what I thought the meaning of the poem was. I remember when I was writing the paper, I was thinking to myself that my work was well done, mainly because I had a good hook and thesis and was making my paper flow well through good transitions. It was not until I got my comments back that I realized I had completely overlooked audience awareness. My focus on creativity compromised audience awareness, and not for the first time in my writing. Over the years, I have gradually learned what audience awareness means, and I often still forget about it, as is evident in my first paper. After I received a mediocre grade on my first paper, I reread it and tried to pretend that I had never read The Exaggeration of Despair, the poem in which I had analyzed. After doing that, I finally saw that what I was talking about would be unclear to anyone who had not read the poem. My repetition of the words these, those, and it were examples of me as a writer assuming that every reader had read the poem. And the lack of repetition of my thesis and the poem's content I saw would further confuse the reader. While creativity was the main focus of my first paper, audience awareness was the main focus for my second paper, The Subjectivity of Suffering, which compared Sunny's blues to the approximate size of my favorite tumor. Although my main focus was audience awareness, I made sure not to compromise the creative process that I love so much about writing. I specifically chose the two short stories I did because I found them both beautifully written and unique, and I knew I could show their striking similarities and differences in a paper well. As for audience awareness, incorporating it was not easy for me, and I had to read over my paper many times before I was confident I had made the story's content and my thesis clear to the reader throughout my whole paper. My second paper, receiving a much better grade than my first paper, allowed me to focus mainly on my first paper during my portfolio process. That is why I chose my first body paragraph of my first paper, Getting the Point Across, to use for my self-revision exhibit. This paragraph in particular had multiple problems with audience awareness, and it needed a lot of revisions to make it comprehensible to the reader. My exhibit shows the process from the first final revision to the rewrite and eventually to the final paper I'm handing in for my portfolio. These three drafts showcase just how much of an obstacle audience awareness has been for me throughout my writing career and how it has been a gradual process to overcome it. While my self-revision focuses on my biggest obstacle in writing, audience awareness, the peer review exhibit I chose focuses on my strengths. I tried throughout all my peer reviews to comment on parts of people's papers that I knew I generally did well on, including introductions, transitions, and making sure to analyze every quote. In this particular peer review, I made sure to praise parts of the paper that I felt were well written and made the paper flow well. For example, the introduction was especially well done, and I made sure to recognize that. Parts of the paper I felt needed more work were a few transitional sentences and backing up evidence. My comments on this further show how much I appreciate creativity when it comes to writing. Transitional sentences are essential in making a paper read well, and backing up evidence is that time when a writer has the chance to put their own creative ideas into a paper and interpret the evidence as they see it. I have always cherished a well-written and creative novel, and I do not think that creativity should have to be sacrificed when writing an analytical paper. That is why I chose to focus on these aspects when peer reviewing. Although analytical writing showcases the formal process of analyzing things or objects, it still has to possess creativity and continuity in order for it to be worthy of someone's interest. I've had success with incorporating this creativity and continuity into my analytical papers, but for my wildcard, I chose an excerpt from one of my favorite novels, Beloved by Toni Morrison, to show how even creative works like Beloved have to, on occasion, incorporate the rules involved in analytical writing. Throughout this course, I have worked to involve creativity in my analytical papers, but have also learned to look at many of my favorite novels differently. I have realized that the authors of novels sometimes have to analyze in their text in order to make that jump from a good novel to a great novel. This is exactly what Toni Morrison has done in Beloved, and I can relate to trying to find that perfect balance between analyzing and creativity, because I have tried to do just that during this course. After this course, I cannot say that writing analytically has surpassed my love for writing creatively, but I can say that I have a newfound appreciation for it. The challenge of audience awareness has been an obstacle I've had to overcome with each paper, but I feel that I can finally say that I've found that right balance between the creative process and the analytical process. With each peer review and paper, I believe I have reasserted my strengths of creativity and strengthened my weaknesses in audience awareness. Now, in light of this course, I even find myself with a new way of reflecting back on novels I have cherished throughout my life.